Motivating Workers and the Theories Behind It. This is kind of an interesting chapter, but it is long, and you're probably going to be saying, how can you have that many theories on motivating workers? Let's go through them so you can kind of understand, and you can kind of progress through the years as things have become more sophisticated in the work world. We'll start off with Taylor's scientific management, and that would be Frederick Taylor, and he was called the father of scientific management. And basically what Taylor did was look at the production, mass production, and try to improve the productivity, try to make it better, because you have to remember when mass production or assembly line production came out, nobody had ever done it before. So he came up with 3 elements, and that was time, how long did it take you to do it, how you were doing it, and if there were rules and methods that could be combined together to decrease the time. And he came up with some really interesting things. How he looked at how the job was performed, and he looked at how much time you had, and he looked at how you could become efficient with it, and then he would test different methods against it. And once he found the best method for the task to be done, he turned it into a rule. And here's the interesting thing, and the very cause for pause here is you should choose your workers whose skills match the rules up here. Well, if you're just beginning with assembly line work and it's mass production, there weren't a lot of workers who had the skills that would match those rules. So kind of think about this. This is how when the school system really began happening, and they tried to incorporate some of the characteristics they wanted into the schools for work. So it's a key point to keep in mind. And the other thing was to establish a fair level of performance and pay. And even though there's always a struggle between this, because you have the people who own the business want to get away with the least amount of cost possible, and your worker wants to maximize the amount of money they make. And it was also during this time that the unions became into play and started to have much more a larger role in talking about performance and pay. Now, from this came time motion studies, and the time motion studies was to literally look at a job, tear it into pieces, little teeny steps that could be done very quickly so that you could improve production. And actually led to a series and a theory, a total theory. It was called The Principle of Motion Economy by Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. And I think they had several children, and their entire life was wrapped around time motion studies. You know, from how do you get out of bed to how do you brush your teeth, what's the most efficient way of doing this. So Frederick Taylor started quite a few things rolling. And if you think, well, that's pretty old-fashioned, why would you be doing that, or is this scientific method still into play? It is, because if you look at UPS, or UPSIs as we call them, they have very strict rules and work requirements, because everything that they do has been studied down to how to hold their keys. You know, teeth up on the 3rd finger. Every movement counts for them. They're even to the point where I think they only make right turns to make deliveries, and they found out it is much more efficient, and they save a bundle of money on gas and time, and deliver more items. So very tight, and it still is being used. So Taylor's stuff was very important, and it still is very important. And if you go to UPS or UPS and try to get a job, you'll find there's a great waiting list. So obviously there is something to the scientific method. They pay well, so they do fair compensation. The next thing that came about was they had everything in an assembly line set up, but they still felt that they could make it more efficient. So they started changing conditions, thinking, well, if I do this kind of light or that kind of light, production will increase. But what they found out was it didn't matter what the change was. Any type of change would increase productivity a certain period of time. And it became known as the Hawthorne effect, and it literally says people act differently when they know they're being studied. If you watch somebody when they're unaware of you watching them, you will see, and when they become aware of you watching them, you will see a difference in how they respond. Think when you were a kid and mom and dad were in the room, didn't you act differently than when you were outside playing with your friends? You just had a different feel, and that's what the Hawthorne effect is all about. The next gentleman to come on the scene, and most of these are gentlemen at this time, was Maslow with his theory of motivation, and that's what we're looking at. How do you motivate people? He looked at things and said, well, people really can't be motivated unless their needs are being met. And he realized there were different needs. And it ended up being in a pyramid. And there are physiological needs, which means food, sleep. Your body has to be taken care of. And then after that happens, you need to feel safe. If you don't feel safe, you're not going to be very motivated because you're going to be hiding all the time. And once you become safe and your physiological needs are met, then you start needing to reach out and have social needs and have interpersonal contact with people. Once that need is met and you look around and you need to feel good about yourself. You need to expand and you need to feel good. So as you move up the ladder, you can, or move up the pyramid, after each one of these needs are met, another one will open up. And the one at the very top is called self-actualization, and that means a need for self-growth, that you just do something because you want to know more about it and because it makes you feel good. You might even look at that as if, I go to work because, not because I want the money or because I have to. I go to work because it makes me feel good. I'm growing from my work. Or some people will do education that way. They're always learning. They will get a degree not particularly because they want to get more money, but because they just want to grow with that. Now, if you come to here, here's another gentleman, by the way, who had other motivators and hygiene factors. He took the needs up here and kind of separated them out and said, well, the motivators are the work, the achievement, the recognition, the responsibility, and the growth and advancement. But there are other factors that do come into effect. And he called them hygiene factors. One was company policy and administration, supervision, working conditions. If these are bad, these motivators here probably won't exist. And that's a good way of looking at it. You have two sets of motivators. So you got to kind of keep that in mind. Even if the work itself is very challenging and rewarding, if it's really poor company policy or poor management, you're not going to want to go to work, and you're not going to want to be motivated to continue working there. So if you compare those two, you can see how salary and personal life, you can just kind of see he kind of blended Maslow and gave it a little more depth and understanding. And then these are more modern theories. There's theory X and theory Y. And that is with theory X, there are two ways that a manager looks at this, and you can actually compare this to education in a way, and put student in place of people or work. It says people generally, that's why I missed X. Hold on, folks. Let me go back to X. There's X. Workers, and put teacher in here, just so you can kind of get an attachment to it. Workers dislike work. Workers must be forced or threatened to work. Workers prefer to be directed. And primary motivators are fear and money. This is a very negative standpoint If you come down and look at the Y theory, it is absolutely just the opposite of that. So, however your manager looks at why you are working or why people are working, it's going to have a really big effect if you consider Herzberg's motivators. So you can see you can have a positive or you can have a negative or a positive effect on your workers with that XY. And we're going to do a quiz on this in class to see which way you look at it. There are various other theories. This is theory Z, which literally, here's the Japanese viewpoint, here's the American viewpoint on this side, and Z is a combination of putting those two together. I would say this pretty well matches what happens at Subaru. It's a company from Japan that is in place in the United States, so it kind of blends these two theories together. And that was Ochi's theory Z. We have goal setting theory, and this one is very interesting because it's also management by objectives. Many big companies use this. Toyota, Emerson, the United States Defense Department, and that's by you look at what objectives you want to get done, and those are the things that you strive for. And that would even go with employees. Employees are asked to sit down and say, what are your goals? What are you going to achieve this year? And when you come back for an evaluation, those goals and objectives will be looked at for your evaluation. Other theories, expectancy theory, which says if I don't think I can accomplish that task, I probably won't even try it. I won't be motivated to try it. Come down to a modification of that, just what employees expect. They want rewards, they want the performance to be good, or at least fair, and they want them to be attainable. Nobody wants to have a standard set so high that it can't be reached. And they need to have rewards tied to performance. Some people agree with this, other people don't agree with this. The key to it all is to make sure the rewards that are being offered are adequate for your employees. Make sure those are the rewards they want. Another one is the use of reinforcement theory, positive and negative reinforcers. This is behavioralism. This is kind of went out of favor, but it still exists, and you will run across that in times. And then there's the equity theory, where employees try to maintain equity between inputs and outputs compared to others, where you're looking and comparing how you're doing compared to somebody else who's in the same situation. If there are inequalities or any inequities found in this, you're going to have productivity loss. You're going to have absenteeism. You're going to have low morale in your company. The whole thing about motivating a worker is it has to work. All of these theories in and of themselves are wonderful, but if they don't work for a particular employee, then you have a problem. So be very aware of how to motivate people, and what are their needs, their wants, their rewards, how do they react. So that's kind of the chapter or our discussion session this week, is how do you motivate an employee. Next video is going to be on motivating employees between generations, which is really very interesting. Thank you for listening.